Welcome back to Finance Bro University, your financial habits. 80% behavior, 20% knowledge. Or is it? Behavior is important. So what are these behaviors? I think that actually knowing 3 key concepts will help you stick to the right behaviors no matter your circumstances. Finance Bro University is the university for the new paradigm in finance. Master the old rules and then break them. So let's examine some of these pillar behaviors, as sold by financial gurus like your Dave Ramsey's. Discipline, stick to a budget, delay gratification, avoid impulse purchases. Consistency, follow the plan every month. Keep your baby steps going, no skipping around. Intentionality, every dollar has to be given a job. Sacrifice, live below your means. Accountability, work with a spouse or a coach or someone who can keep you on track. Responsibility, take ownership of your financial mess, don't blame others. Patience, build wealth slowly, no shortcuts, no get-rich-quick schemes. Obviously, avoid scams. Aggressiveness with debt, use intensity to pay off debt as fast as possible. Goal focus, visualize your goals, keep them in your mind and work toward them daily. Giving, incorporate generosity as a habit even before achieving financial independence. So let's have a look at these goals. They're really complex. There's a lot to them. We need to have a think about them. And I think we can simplify this significantly. I think we can take a simpler approach and remember 3 key concepts. 1, compounding. Your investment decisions are exponential, not linear. Opportunity cost. Assess the true cost of a decision. Time-weighted earnings. Earnings over your lifetime are not equal, and we need to understand this well. Let's explore these concepts in detail. Compounding. Let's look at the value of a $10,000 investment over a 40-year time horizon. If you're in your 20s, this is a legitimate investment time horizon. Now, if you're earning a 10% compounded annual return, $10,000 over 40 years becomes over $450,000. Not only does it become $450,000, as you can see in that graph right here, most of that money is earned in that second half as those larger sums get compounded on top of each other. So you may not see results immediately, but given enough time, things get pretty powerful. And the second concept, opportunity cost, measuring the true cost of a financial or consumption decision. Just because you have money in the bank to buy something doesn't mean you can afford it. Let's take this example, avoiding car poverty. Sam buys an $80,000 car with a 72-month loan at 8% with a $10,000 down payment. His total monthly payment is $1,227 a month. Sarah buys a used car for $10,000 cash and invests $1,227 a month into index funds. 6 years later, Sam has an old car, Sarah has an old car, and $125,000. So the opportunity cost of Sam's purchase was closer to $213,000 when we sum it up. And if you want proof, I have it in the next slide. We can break this example down now. We've got Sam spending $10,000 on his car deposit, Sarah spending $10,000 on the car. Car payments over the 6 years, Sam spends $88,000. Sarah doesn't pay any. Over that same period, Sarah makes $88,000 in deposits into her investment account. Sam makes none. Sarah makes $36,000 in investment returns over that period, bringing her total account to $125,000. Other assets, they obviously both have an old car, and Sarah's might be a little bit older, but that's okay. Now, over that period, Sam is down $98,000 total cost, while Sarah total net spend is $114,000 or $115,000. Now, when you take the difference between these two, the total opportunity cost to Sam is $213,000. That means just because you spent $20,000 on a car or $100,000 on a car doesn't mean that's what the car cost you. Its true opportunity cost grows over time. Every year, Sam doesn't have that money invested in an index fund. He's losing to Sarah, and that opportunity cost will only grow. So he spent $213,000 of total opportunity cost to purchase that car. So just because you have the money in the account doesn't mean that you want to spend it or you can afford it. And for our third and final concept, time-weighted earnings. Earnings made earlier in life have more time to compound and therefore are not measured equally to the earnings that you make later in life. And I'm going to use this example, and it's a little bit complex, so bear with me. But if we take the white line here of earnings over our lifetime between the ages of 18 and 65, we would follow a normal career trajectory where we might have continuously climbing income up into our 30s where we start hitting good money, and then we start getting into these roles that sort of last a bit longer in our career, 5 years or so, and then we have big bump ups as we become like more and more senior and become like get into the exec range of our lives, and then our earnings seem to plateau, and as we get into our late 50s and early 60s, we seem to decline, and then maybe we get into our late 60s and we're working part-time or something like that, and our earnings aren't quite what they were. And that's sort of a typical career earnings trajectory. Now, over that period, we have our savings. And obviously, in the early part of our career, we could only save a rate of around 10 to 15%. And that grows up until our early 30s. And then suddenly we have a family. And for a few years, that really depresses our savings, and then obviously we run through family, and then our kids leave home and our savings can bump right up, and then we trial down on savings as well as we complete our life journey, or we complete our career journey, I should say. And that is like a really generic kind of pathway for someone who's earning a salary, I suppose. But what we can assess is the value of those earnings to our overall lifetime. Now, if we have made savings earlier on in our career or earlier on in our lives, they've got more and more years to compound on each other. Now, if we're doing a 5%, a 10%, or 15%, or a 25% return, we have how much percent of our total cumulative savings that we can achieve throughout our retirement being much higher based on the earlier savings that we got. So if a typical 10% person, by the time they hit 40, have saved about 70% of all that they can ever save, right? Because they've had earnings, or the savings that they've made in the early part of their life, compound for much longer. The earnings that they make after 40, which you can see is like all this like high-end income stuff, doesn't contribute as much to their retirement as what the early years do. And that's the importance of like earning in your 20s, or earning and saving in your 20s. Again, if you're doing 15%, which if you're listening to this channel and you're building confidence, it's not an unachievable rate of return. By the time you're 35, you'll have saved 70% of all your retirement savings that you're ever going to make in your life. And so this part of the curve is really important. And that's the idea of time-weighted savings, is the higher your rate of return, the more value you have in the earnings you make now versus the earnings you make later in life. So don't delay saving. Saving is valuable, and the second best time to do it is today, despite it the best time being 20 years ago. So don't delay saving. It's always more valuable to do it earlier than it is to do it later. So now that we've explored the three key concepts, let's explore some pitfalls that people get sucked into. There's one that I really love that I think is a very boomer-esque style of thinking, which is consumption equals happiness. I think that consumption can create happiness, but I've seen and heard boomers and older people typically talk about, well, I had this amazing life trip, we spent a lot of money, therefore I must be happier than other people. And I think it's a really weird assumption, but there always seems to be this sort of linear equation or linear equatingness of like, if I spend more, I must be more happy. And I think people need to think more nuancedly about how consumption is going to make them happy. Because obviously when we do spend money and we do things, it can make us happiness, can bring us happiness, but it's not always this perfect linear thing. And we have to be very careful about what we consider consumption and how it's going to bring us happiness. But just assuming that we've spent more means that we're happier, I think, is a bad approach. Another one that I see people get caught up in is mistaking high income with high wealth. Just because you earn a good salary doesn't mean that you will always earn a good salary. It doesn't mean that the circumstances that generate that high salary are always going to exist. And so I would not mistake high income with high wealth. Just because you have a good salary doesn't mean you've made it. High wealth is having assets that produce income and having assets that you can rely on to pass you through those lean times. So don't mistake having a high income and thinking, I'm always going to have an high income, which I see a lot. Keeping up with perceived peers, or aka the Joneses. We look at our friends over the neighborhood and they usually are buying expensive cars or they're going on expensive holidays. Generally, they're probably financing it in a way that you wouldn't really want to do. I wouldn't fuss about trying to keep up with people. For me, I own a nice car, but it's nothing special. And I see a lot of people rocking around with their like BMW SUVs and their Merc SUVs. And I'm like, I don't know how these people afford this. And I actually went to a house viewing once, and we were looking at this house and we're like, this is a nice house, but we're not that fussed. And we had this guy rock up in their Merc SUV, and he rocks out and he makes a comment like, this house would be a fantastic upgrade for us. And I'm like, wow, man, like this is a pretty basic house. You must have been plowing all your money into this Merc SUV. And that's the reality. Like most of it is trying to look rich. It's not reality. So don't get locked into this spiral. Another one that I think people get stuck in is spiritualizing poverty or demonizing wealth. This idea that I don't need money, or, there's more to life than money. And there is 100%, but avoiding the responsibility to build wealth and build financial security for your family should not be avoided by spiritualizing poverty. I've seen this time and time again. It's more of a Gen X thing. I've seen it amongst those people that are in their mid 40s and their 40s and 50s. They saw the good times that the boomers had, but they haven't seen the trash that millennials and Gen Z have inherited. And they seem to have this perspective, and they're a little bit fluffy and teddy bearish because they've been growing up in like relatively good times compared to the younger cohort. I think this one's really important for our new generation, especially around those crypto bros, gambling mentality toward investing. I think a lot of people just take these absurd risks and Most of them don't pay off, and every now and then they hear of one person and it paying off for them, and they jump on the bandwagon and they chase pumps, such and such coin is pumping or such and such stock is pumping, and then they go buy late, and then they go and wear the crash, and they just never get anywhere as a result of it. And I've had friends themselves faff around in certain investments where they have chased pumps, taken losses, sold out at the bottom, and they've just not gotten anywhere. And sometimes just letting the compounding and making the right picks up front will sip you up far better in the long run than taking these big highs and these big lows and locking in losses when you're not sure what you're doing. Passive engagement with money, so people just relying on other things to occur or like getting around to it later. Over-reliance on superannuation and retirement systems, relying on KiwiSaver or Australian Super or your 401k and these passive investment vehicles that generate your like 7 to 8% return. I mean, the returns that you get from like a typical superannuation scheme in Australia are shocking. And accepting debt is just a part of life. No, debt is either productive or unproductive, and it can be used very productively or it can be used to drag you down. So be very careful about how you use debt and only take it on if it makes strategic sense. Delay things until crisis, and I think I see this happen a lot. People are like, I'll get round to it, or it doesn't matter, it's not important to me now. And then they find themselves in a crisis and they haven't built the infrastructure and the padding in their life to survive or to carry on through that crisis in a positive way. I've come through lean times in my life, and through my investing journey, I've had plenty of padding to keep things going and not screw with what I'm trying to achieve long term. So don't delay until crisis. Seize today, carpe diem. You can find me on X, YouTube, and my website, mangosteen.global. Thanks. If you enjoyed the content, like and subscribe. And if you have any feedback, please chuck them in the comments below. I will read all of them. And of course, our disclaimer, this channel does not provide financial advice of any kind. You must do your own research. Any investment or trading decisions you make are your own. This is entertainment only, and you are listening to a random mangosteen on the internet.